What is going on, people? I'm going to use this video to talk about the throttle cable guide plates that KTM is shipping with some of their late model bikes. The bike we're talking about today is a 2024 KTM 500 EXC-F, but a lot of their other models, their dirt bike enduro models, are getting shipped with these guide plates as well. So basically what happens is, as KTM puts it, by changing these guide plates out, you will alter the characteristic map of the throttle response. So the way that they're doing that is by changing some of the dimensions between the two. So you'll notice right off the bat there's these two holes where your cable ends meet up. On the gray plate, they're a lot closer together. See how they're farther apart on the black plate? Quite a bit difference there. The other thing is the diameter of the race where the cable rides. The black plate is larger than the gray plate. Might be kind of hard to see that on camera, but you can see even as I move this gray one around, the black one is just a little bit larger diameter. So what that translates into for the rider is that you don't have to twist the throttle as far back. There's less rotational distance required when the black plate is installed. So that essentially just means that you're basically fueling the bike more quickly. The gray plate is going to give you more of a slower, more linear throttle characteristic, whereas the black is going to be a little more snappy. So it's not really to say one is better than the other. It's going to be a personal preference. It's going to depend on where you ride, how you ride. One is not better than the other. You have to try them. You have to make that decision for yourself. There's too many variables. If someone's telling you one is better than the other, they're giving you a biased opinion. It's which you like better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install these, and I'm going to get some marking on the grip and the guide plate housing to show you how much difference there is with the two installed. So let's go ahead and run through that, and I'm also going to do some disassembly and reassembly for those of you that might be interested in that process at the end of the video. Alright, so with the gray guide plate installed, I'm going to demonstrate the amount of twist that is required to go from idle to full throttle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the split in the half shells in the housing for the guide plate and throttle cable. The split is going to represent 0 or idle. I'm going to get a mark on the grip so that we can have that reference point. Okay, so that's idle. Now twist it to full throttle. Let me get a mark here. Okay, so that's about a quarter rotation. Top is 0 or idle. And then you can see our full throttle mark there. Now I'm going to install the black plate. I'll leave this mark here, and we'll do the same thing, and we'll get a mark on the distance for the black plate. All right, the black guide plate is now installed, so let's get our mark going from 0 or idle to full throttle. All right, so there you have it. The lower mark is with the gray plate. The upper mark is with the black plate. So as you can see, the black guide plate requires less twist to get from idle to full throttle. Okay, so for disassembling the guide plate housing, or the half shells as KTM calls them in the owner's manual, I'm going to demonstrate the removal of that. So the first thing you do is you pull this boot off the top of the cables, get that loosened, and you're going to need either an 8mm socket or wrench for these two bolts, or a T30 Torx tip. I have got a little ratcheting wrench with that accepts bits, Torx bits on it. I'm going to use that to pop this loose. So let's break those loose. This is a fairly simple thing to do for, I think, most people in the garage, as long as you got some tools. Let's back these all the way out. Okay, without rubbing my mark off there. Now you do need to take note of which side is which on your cables here, because if you screw that up, you're going to end up having to go back and do it again. So just take note. You've got your two halves, you know, get some directional points here. Then you can pull your cables out of the guide plate. Okay, got one. Got two. So before you pop your guide plate off, you need to take note of the positioning. For one, you've got what's marked as outside here. Then on the opposite side, you can see inside. Now another thing is on the handle tube, or the throttle sleeve as a lot of people call it, you'll notice there is a raised portion, raised square right here. And then there's also a square on the guide plate itself. Those are lined up. So make sure you have that lined up when you go to reinstall this or change it out for the black guide plate. Alright, so we're going to pop the black guide plate on. Now as I said, take note of that square, that little notch in there. You're going to line that up with this notch on the handle tube right there on top of my thumb. Alright. It's a pretty positive snap on there. Now we're going to reinstall. So I go ahead and get the cables lined up right off the bat here. Make sure you got your sides lined up on the correct hole in the guide plate. It's a little bit snug to get that around. So now you got that. Pull the sides put in there. Slide this. Just get this started. I find I don't want to sit there and fight it the whole time. You see how the cables want to push off. Just get that started on there. And come back and get your half shells, your housing, whichever you prefer to call it. Snap those on there. You need to make sure you got this all squared up because they do have some races that fit together on them. Hopefully I'm not screwing that video up for you guys. We're in a chest mount, so sometimes my head moves and I forget to pan the camera with my chest. So I get these started before I start thinking about positioning the depth of the handle tube. Oh, come on, thing. You can use a variety of techniques to spin these in. Now I've got a 8mm on an extension instead of sitting there fighting it by hand. Being a dope. Alright, so leave those just slack enough. You can pop your boot back on. Now slide the handle all the way in. Get it to your rotation that you like it. I like mine about right there. And you can see that KTM is kind enough to print the torque settings right on their parts, or you can check your manual. I will torque this down. So KTM requires that these be torqued to 5 Newton meters, or in the case of the ratcheting click type torque wrench I'm using, that is about 44.4 inch-pounds. So I've got mine already set. Just like you would with any tightening pattern, you go switching between the two so you don't over tighten one side. Okay, that was my click. And man, that seems tight. A lot of people will just do these by hand, but keep in mind, just get it squared up. You can get intrusion from the elements into there and start getting corrosion and damage to your metal parts. So it's not a bad idea to torque it, but just you can snug it up by hand if you don't have a torque wrench. Just don't go very tight because this is just like a cast aluminum housing. You can strip it, break it, crack it. So just go light if you don't have a torque wrench. All right, so thank you to those of you who watched this video. If you like this type of content and you want to see more of it, I really appreciate it if you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share these type of videos with other people. That way, you know, I keep getting a reason to produce more content like this. So anyways, thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.